Hi, everybody. This is Cynthia Kane, and welcome to our first week and our first module of UL100ZB Research Skills, Information, and Technology. We are ready to start with our first module, which is the module of Identify. About, for example, how you actually get your news nowadays. How do you find out what's going on? The current coronavirus epidemic is a very good example of this. How are you finding out what's true, what might not be as factual about the coronavirus? Are you finding out through social media? Are you going to reputable news sites online or in print? Where are you getting this news from? The second video, the scrapping of internet privacy, is a little bit more entertaining, but it also gives a way to thinking about how private our information really is online. Is it very private? Does it really matter? Think about, for example, if you're on Amazon, if you happen to be an Amazon Prime member, for example, you know that if you've ordered from Amazon in the past, you'll start getting more suggestions when you log on to your Amazon account again, that if you bought this in the past, then you might be interested in this and this. The same thing can happen on monetized areas of social media, such as Facebook, perhaps Instagram as well. If we mention that we're interested in a particular product, we might start getting ads pushed at us a little bit more. Somewhere there's an algorithm that's gathering that information about what we've talked about, what we've mentioned, and then we might have advertisements or other things that we think or that somebody else thinks that we'd be interested in just pushed at us. So I really want you to think about these two things as we start thinking about Chapter 1 and our module of Identify. I'm going to go back over here now. And we've mentioned that we want you to download our open free access textbook, the Information Literacy User's Guide. For this module, Module 1, we would like for you to read Chapter 1 of Identify. And this deals with understanding your information need, identifying what you don't know, taking stock of what you already know, and then thinking about search terms that you would put into a database, into Google Scholar, to try to identify and find your information need. So at some point during this module, please make sure that you have downloaded this textbook. Let us know if you have any problems with it, and then read Chapter 1 here, Identify. So after you do this, we're going to think about what information literacy actually is and how this relates to this class. Our textbook states that being able to find and use information well means realizing what you know, what you don't know, what you need to learn, and thinking about those categories throughout the process. This is basically information literacy. This is what we're going to be covering in this course. We actually do not do things such as teach you how to use a specific library, although we certainly will be working in library resources and library databases in the context of this course. We're more interested in getting you to the point where you'll be able to use the information that you find to create new knowledge, such as a research paper, a project, a website, to close the loop of information, so that by the time you finish this course, you're going to be comfortable and familiar with any type of information need that's presented to you, whether it's professional, whether it's student related, whether it is personal, such as needing to do research to rent an apartment or purchase a car. You'll know how to go to find the correct information, how to evaluate it, and how to incorporate it into what it is that you need to do to close that loop of information. So there are 7 pillars of information literacy, and these actually correspond with the modules that we'll be doing throughout our course. Identify, scope, plan, gather, evaluate, manage, and present. We're adding 2 of visual literacy and science literacy that we'll be covering later on in our course. Visual literacy, we want you to think about things such as how easy it is to filter a photo that you put onto social media. Think about photoshopping the cover of a magazine. Also, think about the Facebook post about the newest way to lose weight. Those tie in both to visual literacy and to science literacy. How do you verify what is accurate? How can you tell if something is actually accurate in the first place or if it's actually been manipulated to suit a specific information need? And again, we'll be covering visual literacy and science literacy later in our course. So for this module, on pages 8 through 10 of Chapter 1, we think about research in a little bit of a different way. So what you may need to do, first of all, is identify a personal need for information. Why do you need to know about a topic? Why do you want to know about a topic? Well, a good answer for that is, I need to research this specific topic because I have to write a paper for my course in order to get a good grade, and there's certainly nothing wrong with that. But once you identify a personal need for information, you can go a step further in understanding the context of an information need. This is going to make sense in the next few slides when we look at a very specific topic. And this deals with scanning the information environment, basically finding out what's already out there about the topic. And this can also kind of go into the idea of fake news. What's true? What is false? How do you verify if the sources that you find about a topic are actually accurate, or if you need to delve in a little bit further to find out what's really going on behind the scenes? And finally, moving from an information need to a research question. Now, many of you may have had to write a research question or something called a thesis statement, perhaps for English composition classes or other writing classes. You don't always have to do this for every single information need, but it does help to take an idea or a concept, thinking about what you already know about this topic, and then formulating into what you would like to know about it into a research question or a thesis statement that really specifies what it is that you're going to go find out more about. The other advantage of creating a research question or a thesis statement is that it's going to help you identify something called search terms. In other words, the key words, the key concepts that you're going to search on, whether it's in a library database, in Google Scholar, in a library catalog, to find the items that you need to help you know a little bit more about the topic. Again, this is going to make a little bit more sense in just a few seconds. So we're going to do an exercise here called Mapping a Strategy. Electronic cigarettes, e-cigarettes, vaping, those have been very big topics in the news lately because of increasing concerns about health risks, particularly with minors who might start using electronic cigarettes. The liquid or the juice that's used in the e-cigarettes, and basically the flavors, the fact that flavors may appeal a little bit more to a minor population. So my topic, which is a very broad topic, are electronic cigarettes somehow better than regular cigarettes? Now, better is a relative term, isn't it? Am I talking about health issues? Am I talking about economic issues? Am I talking about socially acceptable issues? We're going to see how this can actually be expanded in just a moment. So what would be a personal need for this information? I might have a loved one, or I might have a friend who is currently using electronic cigarettes, and maybe I am concerned about their health. So I want to go out there, and I want to find more reliable medical sources so that I can provide the person that I know, and perhaps the person that I care about, with more effective, reliable sources of information so that they can make their own decisions on whether they might want to continue using e-cigarettes or if they would want to quit altogether. So that's a personal need. What would be the context of this information need? My context I've already identified. Perhaps I'm dealing with a friend or a loved one. Another context, though, going back to the personal need, perhaps I've decided that I want to do a poster session for a class, and I want to present everything that is out there about e-cigarettes. So the context of that information need certainly could be the product that I am producing at the end. If I'm doing a poster session, then the context of my information need is that I need probably a few more visuals. I might need some photos, I might need some graphs, I might need some tables that talk about perhaps the use of e-cigarettes, ages different groups that use them, and so forth. So the context could be the product, but the context could also be professional or personal. Ultimately, what would be a research question leading to a thesis statement? Well, if I'm dealing with a little bit more of a personal need for this information, I'm probably not going to go to the trouble of writing out a very complex research question. However, my question or my statement could be that I am concerned about my friend's health. And so that's why I want to find out more about perhaps long-term effects of using e-cigarettes. So that could be a research question and a thesis statement. A research question or a thesis statement might be a little bit more formalized if I am writing a paper or if I'm doing a poster session or doing something else for a class or for more of a formal project. So our next step, you may or may not be familiar with, and Chapter 1 talks about this as well in terms of identifying, because right now we're just focused now on identifying our information need. My topic, my perspectives that affect my topic, the sources that I need that will help me find more information or support that perspective, and how I will find those sources. Now, this is a concept that is known as mind mapping or concept mapping. You can do this on paper, but there are also a lot of online sites that will help you kind of start brainstorming some ideas. Bubble Us is one that I like to use. So we're going to switch over here. And we're now going to go to bubbl.us. You will be asked to log in if you want to try this on your own. It's actually kind of fun to do. You can create a free account. You can actually create up to 3 mind maps for free on Bubble Us before you'd have to level up. And most of the time you don't have to do that. You can, as I said, create a free account, or if you have a Facebook or a Google account, such as your Gmail account, you can log in with that as well. I am already logged in to Bubble Us because I want to show you what I can do. And this is just going to take a few seconds to help me kind of focus on my information need a little bit more when it comes to electronic cigarettes. So I'm going to click on this plus sign. And here, where it says start here, I'm going to type in let's do long-term health effects of using e-cigarettes. So that's my topic. What are the long-term health effects of using e-cigarettes? So that is my topic that I have identified here. And that's my first point. What is my topic? My second point, what are the perspectives that affect my topic? Sometimes this can be a little bit more challenging. So perspectives can be things such as health, social, physical. They can be a lot of different things, but what specific perspectives are actually going to help you filter your topic so that you're narrowing it down a little bit more? Now, I've narrowed this down a little bit because I've already said long-term health effects of using e-cigarettes. So my second level is going to be here. And this is where I'm going to start kind of brainstorming now about my perspectives. So a medical perspective obviously is related to health. A medical perspective. However, I might also want to put in another type of perspective. And if I click on here again, I'm going to add another perspective here, perhaps social. Perhaps I have someone who's choosing to use e-cigarettes because that's a little bit more socially acceptable somehow than actually smoking regular cigarettes or using regular tobacco products. And that might be kind of interesting to explore as well. Let's add one more. We're going to click here again. And you notice with Bubble Us, it's very easy to keep adding these bubbles as we go along. So we're going to add one more perspective. Let's do psychological. So again, I'm focusing upon the long-term health effects of using e-cigarettes. Psychologically, again, are we talking about perhaps potential for addiction? We know that nicotine is terribly, terribly addictive. We know also that there are claims on the long-term health effects and medical perspectives that e-cigarettes, supposedly with the juice, contain little to no nicotine. So in this case, if I have someone who's using e-cigarettes, perhaps seems to have an addiction, with the psychological perspective, is that more psychologically addictive? Or is it more medically addictive? So I've got a lot of different things going on right now, and that's just my level 2 on the perspectives. Let's go back here. And now I'm ready for my 3rd level. What sources am I going to need to find that will help me support one or more perspectives? So at this point, you don't have to have specific articles or specific titles of books. You're going to think more about the types of sources now, and this is a big, big concept in terms of information literacy. So let's go back to our bubble us. We'll go back to our mind map. So long-term health effects of using e-cigarettes, since this is pretty current, probably for all 3 of these perspectives, and again, I'm going to go ahead and click on any of these and add a 3rd level. I probably need current news. So again, this is my 3rd level, the types of sources. Certainly for those 2. Now, psychological might be a little bit different. I might really want to find psychological journal articles that might deal with the psychological perspectives of the long-term health effects of using e-cigarettes. Medical perspectives, probably the same thing, but in this case, I probably want medical journal articles. Now I'm going to scroll back up here. Social perspective, I could do sociological journal articles. The social perspective, though, remember there's always more than one type of source. Maybe I might want to do personal interviews. Could I find other people using e-cigarettes? And maybe ask them some questions about how they feel socially. Are they getting pressure on not using e-cigarettes at all? Do they feel that it's more socially acceptable to use e-cigarettes? And so forth. I could certainly keep adding things. I could add books. I could add medical websites. I could add a lot of different things, but you get the idea here on that 3rd level of sources. And then finally, we're going to be ready for level number 4. How am I going to find these sources? Again, you don't need to identify here very specific library databases or anything like that. You're thinking more in terms of what sources are going to help you find these sources on level 3. So now we're ready for level 4. Medical journal articles. Certainly I could go to a medical research database. So you see how that's working right now? I don't even have to know the specific name of the database. That will come later on. Personal interviews. Maybe I could send out a request on social media. There are lots of different ways that I could do this too, but again, I'm just brainstorming. Current news for a medical perspective or for a social perspective. That might come from a general news database or reliable news websites. So again, I'm not ruling out websites at this point. And with psychological journal articles, this is kind of like a medical research database, but I could maybe see if I could find a psychological research database. Now, In reality, if you're doing this is going to take you a lot shorter time than it did me because I was just talking you through the process. I really love the idea of using this type of mind map, either online through Bubble Us or just on paper, because in just a few seconds, I've got an excellent outline of my next steps to actually focus on my information need, my perspectives, my sources, and the resources that I can go to or start identifying to help me find these sources of information. Thank you for watching this. After you finish this, you're ready to watch our next video tutorial on scope. We do encourage you and very much say that you need to watch both of these video tutorials for Identify and Scope before you start thinking about what you want to do for the engagement activities and the learning assessment for this week's module.